Goya Kahnawake Rono, and welcome to another edition of Our Town here on Kahnawake Mohawk Television Network. You're watching Mohawk TV here on local channel 4, Paul's Cable. Joining me in studio today is community member Kenneth Deer and also our co-host Lance Delisle. Hello everybody and welcome to studio.
Yeah, good morning.
Good morning.
So today we're going to be taping a show regarding the investigation into the dismissal of the former Director of Education. We're going to be doing an overview of the matter here in Kahnawake, which has been very tumultuous. As you may know or have heard, there was an executive summary that was released earlier this week by the Mohawk Council of Kahnawake to the public. There was a special meeting that was held where community members were able to attend and openly discuss the executive summary. Members of the steering committee were present. There were 3 members. There was Shirley Ellen Malesh, Patsy Bordeaux, and
Marlon Kane.
Marlon Kane, sorry, excuse me for that. So they were there to receive some questions. We're just going to jump right in. We're going to talk a little bit about that being a very awkward moment too for these ladies who, of course, you know, were commended for the work that they did on behalf of the community. But it was an awkward situation because of the fact that they did not perform the investigation.
Yeah, I think the steering committee was it was unfair for the steering committee to present the summary to the community without having the investigators there to explain what was in the summary or what was in the report and what the summary was based on. Although the steering committee itself read the report, they could not answer some of the questions that came from the floor about how the list of witnesses were selected and some of the other issues. So it was unfortunate for them. I felt bad for them, and I said so at the meeting that it was very, very unfair. But the steering committee did accept the mandate to do this, and congratulate them for that. And we hope that this will lead to at least settling some of the issues that are there. However, I think the report itself has some problems, some serious problems.
Well, yes, of course. Yeah, there was a lot of discussion that had taken place. Now, everybody here has read the report, and we're going to discuss it in stages throughout the show. But there was a lot of criticism, if you will, or even discussion surrounding the report. Is it biased? Is it unbiased? What is the feeling that you're getting, out there in the community, and even just having the opportunity to read the report, covering the issue and following this issue in the community this past couple of years?
Well, if you're asking me, okay.
Here we are.
Well, first of all, to describe the report, not everybody in the audience has read the report, and you have the opportunity to read it. You should. It's divided into 3 parts. First part gives a historical aspect of the incident in question, and then it goes into a few pages about the findings of the investigation, and then it ends with a number of recommendations. And if you read the report, it's a $20,000 to pay for this report. I don't know if we really got our money's worth for it. The historical part, we don't have much issue with it. I think that there are probably some parts that could have been clearer or better explained or clearly explained. And the findings go through, and they do find fault with a number of people. There's some fault with the school committee. I think there are also some criticisms of the staff, and also criticisms of some community members that nobody's mentioned, with the exception of one, which was very odd, that they mentioned the name of a human relations problem at Survival School by the name of Dio Hemlock.
Yeah.
And why his name is specifically mentioned in the findings of the report was questioned by the people in the audience, because there's nobody else mentioned. No other names are mentioned here outside of Donna Lahash and maybe one other. But why his particular name was in the summary is a mystery to all of us. Why that would be in there? I guess all by itself, would be an interesting. The underlying what seems to be underlying this report, though, is that there's a number of references to people in the Longhouse, and particularly the 207 Longhouse, and it seems to be an undercurrent in this whole and an entire report. So we have to wonder what's in the big report, if this is just a summary of that. But why that particular individual was centered and mentioned in this is seems to indicate there are I don't know why the investigators felt it was necessary to put the name in, because even the steering committee, a member of the steering committee, mentioned that she objected to that her name being in the summary, and yet the investigators insisted that the name go in there, and that's mystifying. Why?
It was very odd. And Kenneth Deer's mother was there, Carla Hemlock, and she had questioned the steering committee surrounding this issue, and also made a statement to the fact that Kenneth Deer was never contacted and that he was never interviewed.
That's right.
Regarding the matter. But yet, according to Cooperative Solutions, who also were the firm that was hired to conduct the investigation, through the steering committee, a comment was made that they felt that it was one of his human resource issue at the school at the time spawned a very public debate in terms of whether he was going to stay or not, from my understanding, and also that, and this is one of the reasons why they had mentioned him and so on and so forth. But if you read the executive summary, it doesn't make sense. It's unclear, and then it becomes even more questionable in the sense that this young man was never contacted for an interview to, if it was indeed such a big public issue and a public debate, then why not contact that person that you're going to be naming as part of an investigation?
I think it was entirely unnecessary to mention the person's name. I think if they could have, if it was an issue, all they had to say that there was a staffing issue that consumed some time and some attention and just leaving it at that.
Exactly.
And just leaving it.
Yeah.
And there's no why they had to use his name. It seemed to me that there's this. Attitude, this underlying thing that they felt that it was necessary, and why they feel it was necessary, I don't understand that.
That was one of my questions that I wanted to ask, is that, there obviously had to be people who were interviewed. Do we know who was interviewed? Because obviously Deal was not interviewed. How did they gain so much information just in the incident with the Hemlock incident, as it's mentioned in the summary?
We don't know who the list of witnesses are that were interviewed, and the steering committee said that they didn't choose the list of witnesses either. They were presented with a list apparently.
And where did that list come from?
That's a good question. The question was asked, and I think the assumption was that the list came from the band council.
Okay.
That's the assumption.
Well, I know that Patsy Bordeaux had answered a question surrounding the Mohawk Council's involvement, and somewhere in the meeting it happened, I'm not sure, maybe it could have been the middle, where a community member did question, the involvement of the Mohawk Council and were they or weren't they a liaison in getting information back to Cooperative Solutions, and did they coordinate meetings and lists and things like that. And that was never clarified, but she did say that a Mohawk Council employee, which was Winona Polson-Lahash, had coordinated all their meetings. So they were simply just informed of what was going to be happening, and then they would show up and so on. So, I believe that this investigation was contracted through the Mohawk Council of Kahnawake. It was paid for through the Mohawk Council of Kahnawake. So therefore, they do obviously have some involvement in the process.
Yeah, the steering committee seems, from what I get, didn't have any influence on the research at all. All they were doing was just to make sure that the research was done. I don't think they had any say on the quality of the report and how it would be done, and who should be interviewed.
But should they have? Because in their terms of reference, it does talk about, to a certain extent, that they are to oversee the investigation and the process and things like that. So how much of, the liability do they assume in this situation?
I don't know. It sounds like they didn't take had no active role in the research itself.
I agree.
In a sense with, for instance, assigning, saying, gee, it'd be a good idea if you talk to so-and-so or talk to so-and-so. It didn't seem like they had that kind of influence. And,
But they stood by the process. I mean, at the time when I was there, I attended the meeting, I had specifically asked, do you feel that the process was flawed, or was it a valid process? And although one of the committee members said, well, I had certain issues with the investigators being biased, and I also didn't agree with Kenneth Deer's name being mentioned, and so on and so forth, I do believe that the process was fair and just. So,
and that's fine, and
Yeah.
they're entitled to their opinion. But the rest of the community, the rest of us who have not seen the whole report, have to base their judgment on the summary.
And what do you think about that? I mean, you have these three individuals from the community that sat on the steering committee that obviously who stated that they had read the full executive report, but yet it's not available to the community. $20,000 is an awful lot of money for people not to have access to this document.
Well, I think that the whole issue goes back to the very beginning when people were demanding to know why was Delisle Hesh let go, and the school committee said we can't. It's a human resources issue. You can't. It's confidential, and the study itself here, the summary says that the school committee was unjustly being asked and pressured to give that when they couldn't, and that the school committee handled it as best as they could. They did well not to reveal those that kind of detail. But I guess the full report though would probably have all that confidential information in there probably, and that's why it can't be released.
They seem to have gotten around a lot of issues based off it being a human resources issue, and then turning it around and where it becomes a conflict resolution issue. Where's the fine line in between
They
there?
do make reference to that.
Now, this is where I have a concern about about cooperative solutions doing the study. In the summary on the bottom of page 1, it tells you who the two people are: Dr. Barbara Landau and Darrell Landau, and they are experts in ADR, alternative dispute resolutions. Both of them are, and that's fine. That's nice that they're experts in it, but they're not experts in human resources, in personnel issues, and this specific kind of a context. They're there as they're there to resolve disputes, and this is not a study that's there to resolve a dispute. They're there to resolve a human resources issue.
Yes, because
and I think the expertise is lacking in this study.
I agree, because first of all, you have to remember that the whole point of the investigation was to look at if the decision that was made by the Kahnawake Combined School Committee into the releasing, if you will, of the former Director of Education, was the process that was used flawed, or could they substantiate it? So it kind of brought in, when you're looking at this issue, there was a lot, and we're going to get into the recommendations actually, because not right now, but further on in the show, we're going to get into the recommendations that they had made. But the report, in a lot of people's opinion, didn't substantiate the Combined School Committee being expelled, if you will, or suspended. There's still a lot of questions, and we are going to be discussing this in further detail, so don't go away. You're watching Our Town here on Kahnawake Mohawk TV Network. This program has been brought to you by Get and Go, a proud sponsor of Mohawk TV programming. And welcome back to the show. You're tuning into Our Town. If you're just joining us right now, we're talking about the independent investigation into the dismissal of the former Director of Education here in Kahnawake. In studio is Kenneth Deer and co-host Lance Delisle. We're going to jump right back into it. There was a number of findings that were revealed through the investigative report summary. One of them being that the process that was used to dismiss Donna Lahash was unsatisfactory. The
That's
review
right.
was unsatisfactory.
And they, and they go into it quite a bit. You have to look at if you look at the mandate of the people doing the investigation, it was very specific. They were lettered from I to F, I to G or something like that, and they're very, very specific to. It's a very human resources oriented list, and it's very specific about was she well informed? Did she answer this kind of question or do
Right.
that kind of thing? So it's very, very, very specific. So it wasn't broad. I felt it was very narrow actually, and very, when they talk about having a narrow focus, I thought that the mandate that we're given was very narrow, and I think the summary goes beyond that those points. And in a way, I'm glad it did. So when you look at the mandate and they're looking at the specific human resources kind of questions that are asked, and in here it does give it is critical of the school committee in the way they handled some of the issues, not entirely.
Right.
They also mentioned that the first review, although it was flawed, was they still had the school committee did have the authority to dismiss her
Right.
after the first review, but they gave her a
probation.
a probation
Extension.
and extension, and indeed and the second review. They're saying here is that it was flawed in some ways, and but it doesn't say that she shouldn't have been dismissed. There's nothing in the report here that says that Donna Lahash should not have been dismissed. It did not anywhere did it say that the school committee did not have the authority to dismiss her. So there's nothing in here that says that. It does say that there are problems with the process. However, in response, the school committee put out a press release yesterday stating that they felt that the summary did not adequately reflect all the things that took place in her evaluation, and that
Right.
more things were done, and that is not reflected in the summary. So
Like
the,
why
the school
reasons-
committee is
yeah.
not happy with they feel the report is somewhat balanced, but not totally balanced.
And there was explanations, from what I understand too, and speaking with some of the members of the combined, were that, upon reading the full report and then reading the summary, that there were some issues in terms of why things happened a certain way, and then the explanation would follow. But in here, you're not getting that. You're just getting, well, this is one of the reasons. And so it still has, there's still questions for community members or even the committee that may have been answered in the executive report, but wasn't in the summary or didn't come out in the summary.
Also, there are some inaccuracies. And I'll give you a small one. It says in here that on January 23rd, members of the ad hoc conducted determination with security present in case matters escalated. This is when she was released. That's not true. The security. There was no security when present when she was terminated. Security was called in after called in later. When things got out of hand with someone else. So there are some inaccuracies in here. And if that's inaccurate, then what else is inaccurate? I know that this is true.
Speaking with Ms. Lahash, when this had first all happened, I do recall her saying that it was surprising that members of the combined school committee were there. They had given her the letter. There was, I don't know if it was security but she was escorted to her office. She was only allowed to get certain things. She was asked for her cell phone back. It was very shocking. So the way that she explains it is that there was a certain amount of security issues that had,
Well, it wasn't.
I'm just saying what she stated to Mock TV at the time.
I think the peacekeepers were called in after when somebody else got there who was quite riled up and it felt for safety that they had to call in the peacekeepers.
Yes, I do know who you're talking about.
How did that come about with that information? Was that presented publicly, or was that just something that was said during different interviews?
I spoke with the school committee member about that. about that. And I think that happened a long time ago, you know. So, but it's there. I mean, it's not confidential. It's
No,
exactly
and she did
what
discuss
happened.
it too.
Yeah.
That's right.
When it happened.
Yeah.
No, so what I'm saying here is that there may be things that are reported in there that may not be that accurate, and may have facts may be evolving in some of the witnesses' memories that have a different perception of what actually happened.
They also had, on page 6 here, they talked about different things, and including witness testimony support the view that the ad hoc had already knew what outcome they wanted and made that happen. I just find that really ambiguous in terms of, going through this process and then making that sort of statement, like they already knew what they wanted. I believe that, the Combined School Committee has already stated that they had the best intentions of trying to work with Ms. Lahash, and they have proven that by giving the probationary extension, you know what I mean? So that didn't make sense to me. And also there was some reference made, and it keeps continuing to come up, and I don't know if either of you can offer some insight about the Saint Sever trip. And the fact that there was some issues about it being less or than satisfactory or something to this effect, but they don't say about the Saint Sever trip, but it keeps coming up, and it's even mentioned here again in the report.
It's mentioned twice, and my understanding of the Saint Sever trip was that it was a brainstorming session, I guess, that Ms. Lahash had organized in Saint Sever, and the school committee, I think, and the director of finance said that it was $10,000 or something like that, and at that time there was a threat that our budget would be cut by $100,000, and they felt that maybe it would be unwise to spend $10,000 on this and have it more locally where it would cost less, and it would be more more prudent to do it that way. But instead, the executive director went ahead with the meeting in Saint Sever. So that caused some tension between the financial director and and Ms. Lahash and the school committee and Ms. Lahash. Well, that's not explained in here. So if you're not listening to the show, you won't know that. And you see the Saint Sever in here and not knowing the context of that.
Which again talks about the reflection of the summary report not truly reflecting or being able to explain that issue along with others, which the Combined School Committee obviously fell and put out that press release.
Right.
Sorry, what were you going to say?
Well, my biggest concern right now, and maybe I'm jumping ahead a little bit here, but what has the parents said about this report? Because obviously it was issued from the time where we have it in our hands. They've actually had a chance to look at this. Has there been some sort of public forum to discuss about this?
No, my understanding is this report is the summary has been presented now to the community, and it's to the parents, and now the parents can discuss. It's up in their hands. It's in the hands of the parents now if they want to pursue this executive summary. Then it'll be discussed at the next general school committee meeting.
Right.
I presume that's the process.
During the presentation, there were some community members who talked about the inconsistency in the report and the language that was used and so on. So parents are already stressing some of their concerns. Yet there were some parents who talked about closure and the fact that hopefully at this point, there could be some sort of moving on and healing and trying to put everything in the past and move to a better place.
Well, first of all, I think a lot of healing has taken place since this. I think the schools have been functioning, have been going on. We have an interim education director now, and she seems to be doing fine. The school structures system is operating and seems to be operating well. Some of the cuts and wounds are fading away, but they're still there. The fundamental problems are probably still still remain there was a lot of animosity that was created, and some mistakes were made, and I've been critical. I wrote 2 editorials in the Eastern Door over this whole process. So one way back in February of last year and last September, critical of the suspension of the school committee and critical of the whole behavior, of the unprofessional behavior by some staff, people and this anti-Longhouse fever that gripped, that surrounded this whole thing. I was very critical of those things, and those things are not resolved.
Right.
And you can't. You say, well, let's forget about it, as if it didn't happen.
They opened up a can of worms, though, as a result of
that's right. And
you started 3 years ago.
You look at the suspension of the school committee has caused a deep wound in this community. And you had, people camping out in front of the band council. You had students marching from survival school. You had, it caused a lot of hard feelings. And I say it was a mistake to do that. And looking at this executive summary, there's not enough in here to justify the suspension of the school committee. It's very clear. Yes, the school committee could have done some things better, but not enough that they should be suspended. There's no corruption. There's no, there's nothing like that. No money stolen. There's nothing like that. There's nothing here to justify what happened to the school committee, and that you can't forget that. Because if you do forget, that's going to happen again. And the same thing with with any unprofessional behavior that some of the staff may have taken part in. That has to be dealt with. You can't forget about it, because it'll happen again. If it happens again, if you don't record it somewhere, your disciplinary action will be more difficult the second time it happens.
Do you think possibly this all stemmed leading up to this summary report because the policy was out of date?
Well, I think the policies always continually should be updated. Every 5 years, 10 years, and obviously, and it's clear that some we're not there. And so the school committee had to deal with it as it came along, and they did the best they could under circumstances. The report says that doesn't say so, but it says that there are some human resources issues that are now being dealt with by the school committee. But not only that, but it already started before the whole incident came up with Ms. Lett, that the school committee had already put into process a process to get an expert in to review the human resources area, and they are now looking at setting up a department for human resources.
They were pretty public about that too.
They were doing stuff. It's not that the school committee was standing still at all of this. They were moving in the right direction. This whole incident, by blowing up the way it is, really set back all of that, because they had to deal with the school committee was now in crisis mode, for over a year, and that delayed good positive development.
That's one of the things actually I wanted to ask you about being in this crisis mode. It seems like we're now going to be revisiting further crisis as a result of this, because it seems like the 207 Longhouse was implemented as being quote unquote some of the cause, but then it was dismissed. All within the same summary.
Well, I definitely wanted to get into that, but wait, now we have to go to a quick commercial break. Don't go away. There's going to be more here on Our Town, here on Mohawk TV. Stay with us. This program has been brought to you by Get and Go, a proud sponsor of Mohawk TV programming. And welcome back to the program. If you're just joining us, we are discussing here today on Our Town the independent investigation that was conducted through the Mohawk Council of Kahnawake into the combined school committee and the process that they used to dismiss former Director of Education Delisle Hash. There was a number of reports or recommendations, if you will, that came out from this investigation, but we wanted to talk about the contradictory process, if you will.
Well, I think what we were discussing about was the how many times the Longhouse is mentioned in this report.
Yes.
The 207 Longhouse.
The 207.
Because apparently there's 2 Longhouses.
Well,
Or
the contradictory language, sorry, yes, because there was some concerns raised about
Well,
that.
well, the 207 Longhouse is mentioned a few times in here, but
Right.
one of the most important ones was on Water Line 6, which said, contrary to allegations by the complainant and some witnesses, the evidence did not show that the ad hoc committee was unduly influenced by members of the 207 Longhouse.
Right.
And so this, and this was fundamental right from the beginning, that it was people were saying those people were responsible for
Those
this
people,
problem.
yeah.
Those people meaning people from Longhouse, or particularly the 207 Longhouse. It doesn't say in the report that Mohawk Trail Longhouse also has a member on the school committee, and it was part of the ad hoc committee that recommended the termination of Donna, but that seems to be a bit. The only focus seemed to be focusing on 207. So it's so it's good to hear that these independent experts could not find any evidence that the 207 Longhouse influenced the decision. And because that's what was the big blame. The Longhouse was being scapegoated by certain individuals, who was stirring, fanning the flames of this kind of discrimination and sometimes hatred towards the Longhouse, blaming the Longhouse for the dismissal of Donna LaHash. The report here says that's not what happened, and I think that's fundamental to this whole thing, because there was so much of that, a venom, directed towards the 207 Longhouse, and it was unjustified. And I think the people in the community who were pushing that agenda, you got to look at yourself and see what you're creating, what kind of community you're pushing, what kind of values you're pushing here in this community when you put that much hatred or like I said, a venom towards the Longhouse when it's not true. When the Longhouse keeps telling you that it's not true, other people, non-Longhouse people, saying that it's not true, and yet you just block your ears. But this anti-Longhouse sentiment in this community is not healthy, and it's not good, and people have to deal with it, and deal with it quickly before it gets more nasty than what it has been.
Why do you think that there's such a backlash on the 207 Longhouse?
I don't know. I think the Longhouse, asserts itself every now and again. It's been involved in education forever. I mean, people are. How come the Longhouse is there? We've always been there. The Longhouse has always been there, and the very existence of our schools, Indian-controlled schools in Kahnawake, is because of the Longhouse. It's the Longhouse that started the Indian Way School, which was the first Indian-controlled school in Canada in the modern era, and it influeinfluenced Department of Affairs to put up the Indian-controlled Indian Education Act 1 year after the Indian Way School. It was the Indian Way School that influenced Canada to change its policy so that now all the schools across Canada that are controlled by Native people on reserve is because of the Longhouse.
So by saying, just to add to that, in the report it talks about the modernists, which seems to be a real thorn in a lot of people's. Because you were just talking about.
There was a comment that was made. Yeah.
You were talking about how progressive the Longhouse was in implementing a school system, in implementing traditional values, but also strengthening up education from a Native perspective.
And language.
And with language included. Now, it mentions in here about modernists. Who is that?
I don't know. If you look at the recommendations, which we, number eight, on page the bottom 16 says, if divisions persist between traditionalists and modernists, there will be a continued turmoil. Will there be continued turmoil at the education center?
So
and this, I'm just wondering where the investigators got this from.
Yeah,
right?
what language is this?
What is a modernist?
What is a modernist?
To me, a modernist might understand. A modernist is somebody that likes modern art. That's the typical definition of a modernist. But that's not what they mean here.
No.
But when you say traditionalists and modernists, the underlying implication here is that you have modern people and the traditionalists are not modern, or are ancient or backward.
Historic.
And that's not true. Like I'm a traditionalist. I follow my traditions as best I can. I attend a Longhouse. I go to ceremonies. I follow the Great Law. I follow the clan system. I do all, and I try to live that. It's being a traditionalist is a way of life. But I also live in a house, a modern house. I have electricity. I drive a car. I watch TV.
Yeah.
I'm on the internet. I have a Facebook page.
Yeah.
I'm modern as well, you know. And so
Yeah.
it doesn't, this whole idea,
Progressive, perhaps?
the idea between, well, progressive maybe, but it doesn't mean other people are not progressive. This whole idea is an artificial divide between the traditionalists are being not modern and people who are modern, and that is part of the problem.
Yeah,
and that people
I agree.
Again,
I
a lot of
agree.
contradictions within this report where it exonerates the 207, but then right at the tail end of the report, it brings back those divisions once again to the forefront.
Yeah.
It's a biased. You can say between traditional and non-traditional. You could say, but you can't. We're using terms like modernist is trying to divide it, that people who traditionally are not modern and other people are modern, and that's the the derogatory comparisons that are made, maybe subconsciously, but they got that from someplace.
In this narrative,
Yeah, they got that from someplace, and it's a big issue here in the community too. If you take somebody like myself, I wouldn't consider myself a traditional person or traditional by any means, but I attend the Longhouse to follow the clan system, attend the ceremonies, learn about the culture, the language, and have that way of life here in our home, or very matriarchal home too on top of it. But I wouldn't say, well, I was a traditionalist. So where does that leave the rest of the community that, I'm not a modernist? What is that?
You don't like modern art?
I don't, you know what I mean? I have a Facebook page. We run the media where, you know what I mean? It's just, it is a very, cold statement, or just something that I find doesn't reflect the community. And when they make reference to it, are they making reference to traditional people versus people who believe in a system, a more council system, a new wave of governance? I'm not sure.
In this condensed summary that they have here, it seems like they've divided the two parts as good and evil.
That's right. And you look at divisions persist between pro-Lahash and anti-Lahash,
Right.
or pro-school committee and pro-MCK factions. And although some of them might not be the same, but it certainly it identifies that there are some divisions in this community, and they got those from those witnesses, and then but to the cures though is from those very same witnesses.
Yeah.
Is if they are defining these divisions, then it's also in their power then to try to get rid of those divisions, or to bring those divisions closer together.
Right.
And I don't know if that's happening. And it's certainly in the report that we had to see some healing in the community. I'd be careful here about healing. Like I said, a lot of healing has already taken place. People have moved on. They put a lot of things behind them. But that doesn't necessarily mean that if you don't deal with the fundamental issues, it's going to come back and bite you. Healing is not necessarily forgiving. Healing is dealing with the with the issues.
Yeah.
And sometimes it might be a little painful, but you have to deal with them. Or else if people deserve a reprimand or something like that, then that's part of that. If the healing is part of. You have to have all sides have to feel that that they have their justice has been done.
And it's interesting that you make that point about the healing, because in the report they do talk about, if a situation arises again where parents or the Moa Council want an investigation, there needs to be an accepted process in place. And then it goes on to talk about if divisions persist between these divided groups. And I think that at one point, one of the parents stood up during the meeting and said, we need to move on and learn from this. Of course, there should be a huge learning and experience that comes out of this whole situation. A community cannot go through this type of tumultuous time, if you will, and not come out stronger. But doesn't necessarily mean that all is forgotten in your moving forward.
That's right.
What I've seen from this, just with the summary, is that we are at the cusp of divisions, and divisions where they're stemming from Again, it looks like it's coming from the outside in. There doesn't seem to be any clear solution to this. We all know that Ms. Lahash has moved on to another job. We know that the remainder of the community is left with still a lot of unanswered questions. We have a division between the modernist and a traditionalist, if I can quote this page. So to me, there's still so many unanswered questions, and more than anything, it seems like there's going to be a lot more unhealing as a result of this.
Where does it leave us? You know,
Well,
like
I think because the report comes out now, like 1 year after everything is all over, you know, it resurrects these issues, you know, and maybe it's good that people have been allowed to move on in the meantime, like the schools are running, which is so critical.
That's
the most important.
That's
That
right.
the kids are the most important thing is the kids, and that the schools are running and the kids are learning, and that's what's supposed to be all. This is what it's supposed to be all about. You know, what we have to be about now is that whatever happened doesn't happen again.
Right.
You know, and there's more than healing that has to take place. You know, there also
Exactly.
has to be some changes. You know,
and they talked about this, you
Yeah.
know, the recommendations in the report. There was no sweeping recommendations. If you look back to, you know, page 6 of the
Yeah.
report, they talk about this, that they're not doing an overhaul of the education system, and that there were things
no
that they
sweeping
could
changes.
advise. Yeah, no sweeping changes. So to me, you know, there were suggestions that were made in terms of the board having training. And, you know, this is one thing that kind of got the audience, again, that was there that night when this was presented, talking about, you know, having a professional board in place. And there was a comment made that, you know, do these people, meaning the investigators, understand that one day in this community you could be a taxi driver and the next you could be a chief on council. So when you're talking about professional boards, be very careful what you're asking for, because these people are from our community. They give their time and are dedicated and so on and so forth. But can that comparison be made and extended to the political sphere in terms of having candidates that are
You gotta
professional?
You got to be careful here.
Yeah.
You know, take the Mohawk Council as an example. They're politicians. They're elected. They're community members that are elected, you know, by popular vote to get out, and they have their duties and responsibilities. They're politicians. All right. The staff. They're the professionals, you know, the executive director, the other directors, and assistant directors,
Yeah,
and all the
technicians,
foremen. Those are the professionals, you know, and they are expected to behave in a professional way, you know. But the council they represent the community, you know, and they're there to you know to act in their position as that, you know, to represent the community. School committees in a similar situation. They're elected or appointed, you know, by a system and you know, controlled by the Constitution, and they have a duty to oversee the education, and that's what the community wanted. And then it's the professionalism is of the staff. The staff are supposed to be professional. That's their job. You know, that's part of it. Anybody who's not unprofessional shouldn't be there. You know, it's not you can't look at the band council to be just full of professionals. You know, because it won't work. You know, because you're not going to. Certainly it'd be good if they had certain skills. That's fine, you know, and there's some of them are skilled, some of them are not, but you got to have the spectrum of the community represented in there, and that's what you want. The school committee, the same thing. The school committee has a broader reflection of the community than the band council, because the band council only reflects those that run elections and they vote and stuff like that. The school committee has a broader, there are people there who don't vote, there are traditional people in there, you know, and there are people who do vote. Has a broader spectrum of the community in the school committee than the band council. So, but you don't want only professionals to be running for the school committee. Then what you're doing, you're eliminating the rest of the community who are not quote unquote professional, and you're also.
I agree. It's a very dangerous word
You're creating a professional class. You know, that this professional class of people in our community, those are the ones that should be running for council. Those are the ones that should be running for the school committee or Davidson Izakta or any place. So you got to be I'm reluctant to put those kind of barriers on people to get involved in these committees that we have in our community. To be restricted to professionals, quote unquote professionals, or well-educated people.
The combined school committee was developed by concerned parents who weren't quote unquote professionals, but were able to implement a whole broad way to present education to this community, and also to be able to shake up Ottawa as best they possibly could back in at the inception of the school committee. Let me ask you one thing, and this is the part where it talks about at the end is a recommendation of healing. What is the 207's position in healing? What's some of the recommendations in that?
Well,
Is that something that's agreed upon?
It's part of tradition. I mean, healing is part, and we've tried. Like I've been on here a couple of times saying that we've met with the band council. The divisions in here that exist politically, and we met with the council, and we told them what our positions are, and they've never returned. They said they would, and they haven't. And so what our position is that one is that we try to keep an open door, that we also, when we speak, that we speak respectfully, that we try to keep our personalities and egos and everything outside the door, and when we meet, that we only speak with a good mind, and to try to using reason. Those are traditions, and we all have sometimes. Some people are easier to do that. Some people can live up to those traditions easier than others, and it's some people are not raised that way, and are raised in adversarial. Lawyers are trained to be adversarial, for instance. I'm not saying all lawyers are like that,
right.
But what they're training on in the outside is adversarial. I'm right and you're wrong, and you're going to have to. I'm going to prove you wrong, and it's a debate. It's one versus the other until one wins. In tradition, it's not like that. The tradition is supposed to reach a consensus reaching, and that takes skill, and it takes oratory, it takes tolerance, patience, and doesn't work quickly, but it does work, and we're getting people to one mind, to come to one common solution and goal is that takes skill, and also has to give and take by people to get there.
Right.
And those are traditional forms of trying to get to those resolutions and that healing in that way. Healing is not unconditional forgiveness. That unconditional forgiveness, although might be an aspiration, but it's not necessarily a cure to division.
Exactly, and it doesn't necessarily fix everything. At this point, we're going to take a quick commercial break, come back, wrap up the show. So don't go away. You're watching Our Town here on the Kahnawake Mohawk Television Network. This program has been brought to you by Get and Go, a proud sponsor of Mohawk TV programming. And welcome back to the show. We are just getting ready to end off here. So we're going to be discussing some of the recommendations that came out of the executive summary, and where do we go from here. But one of the things that I noticed was that these recommendations were actually, there was 8 points. There were suggestions to areas that connect closely to the investigation, is what the 2 investigators stated. They also said that the main problems that need to be addressed are listed below with some options. So we'll just name them off in point form. One was making expectations and objectives clear and manageable.
Yes, I think some of the suggestions are common sense. One of the problems with the report is that the recommendations aren't recommendations. They make statements, and this is unusual for me.
Yeah.
Usually, when the people make recommendations, they're clear. This is our recommendation. This is why, and this is what we should be done. They don't do this in the report. And I think it's a flaw in the report, in that it's more of a narrative, and without very clear. They talk about that there should be some mentorship with a new director comes in. what they omit here, what there was a mentor. Eddie Cross was hired to help in the transition of when Donald Hash came here, but he
Yes.
wasn't utilized. So to try to, so again, I think there are some omissions that taint the recommendations here. And another in that same one, it says should objective for the school committee to get broad communal legitimacy. The school committee has broad communal legitimacy. Why are they questioning the legitimacy of the school committee? In this recommendation, where does that come from? It doesn't explain that. And because they have it, and why raise that issue? Because without there's no recommendation here at all. They raise the recommendations in this study raise asks more questions than offer solutions. And I think that's wrong. It's improper to be in this part of the executive summary. The next one, ensuring proper procedure and evaluation, that's fine. They have already started the school committee has already started to do that, and the recommendations don't seem to be they're controversial. It's clear that that's what they have to do, and they started to do that before there was an incident with Ms. Lahash. Again, in this report, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There are 7 questions that are asked. These are not recommendations, but just more questions. And here's and there's some of them are outrightly strange. This one says, how often does a person run for election with a particular agenda, or is appointed with loyalties that interfere with diverse perspective or overall broad expectations? Everybody has an agenda. How do you judge people? How do you judge who has an agenda and who doesn't have an agenda? What their agenda is? That's all about politics. That's the whole idea of politics. And how do you? And they're asking questions on this. The questions is inappropriate.
Yeah, and strange because
necessary.
it's not necessary, but maybe this is something that you should have already known or even attempted to reconcile with yourself and as the investigators.
Yeah, that's right. And also one here is how successful has the school committee been in enforcing ethics on members, particularly those who are representing another body? Example, the Longhouse. Again, a shot at the Longhouse.
Yeah.
When has there ever been an issue of ethics? In my long history, I can't remember an ethical problem that we've had with members.
You were actually a principal at Survival School.
I was director of Survival School for a couple of years. I was on the school committee for a couple of years. I was involved. I was an administrator. I was part of the running post-secondary. I was on also not locally, but I was on a founder of the First Nation Education Council, the National Indian Education Council. I've been involved.
So there's a lot of background, and so in your experience, in at least what you were involved,
where is this ethics coming from? And I think this whole question again goes back to the anti-Longhouse sentiment in some of the witnesses.
That's
here.
where I think it's coming from.
These are invented, or exaggerated issues, and that are reflected in here, but not as a recommendation, but then as a question. So it's casting these kind of dispersions in the air, about these issues, and I think it's entirely improper that they should be in this report the way it is, the way it's presented. What else?
They had talked about hiring qualified people, and this is where that, after they go into those bullet form point of questions, they talk about would it be better to have a professional school board in place, and of course we talked about this, hire a type of ombudsman or have council do it. These are questions. They're not talked about after that at length. They're just talking about, kind of just putting it out there and leaving it for the community to discuss, I would imagine.
It says that they put all these questions up in the air. Then they say, we do not feel ready to suggest fundamental changes to the system. But then they throw all this stuff up in the air, and throw these ashes in the air, and expect us to see clearly. It's not a clear recommendation, and it's not the way I would write. I'll say it right now. I don't think it's a well-written report. I don't think the recommendations are well written or well articulated, and for $20,000 I would expect something better than this, the way it's presented.
And I think that was expressed at the meeting, and I believe one of the parents had said that, okay, we have the report, we're going to be calling our own special meeting to discuss, move forward with the combined school committee and take the suggestions from there. From that was my understanding, and how some of the parents wanted to move forward through this. Was it does come back to the combined school committee at this point and the parents, because I still think the authority lies with the parents and the school system.
How exhausting is this for you, Kenneth, in always having to uphold the stature of the 207 Longhouse?
Well,
Is that what I'm doing?
I kind of
Yeah,
wanted
by
to
saying that, and by
I
saying
know,
the reason why I'm
but
saying
yeah.
that is for the simple reason is that this seems to be an ongoing process all the time.
Well, I think it's really important for community members to understand why you came on the show today and what was your position. I mean, just having all the experience.
I came here as an individual, first of all.
Right.
The Longhouse didn't send me. I'm here as Kenneth Deer,
Right.
Yes.
who is part of the 207 Longhouse, but I'm here as an individual who has been involved in education for many years. I was an employee for 16 years, and I've been involved, provincially, nationally, and internationally. I fought for the text in the UN Declaration on the rights of disabled people that deal with education. I fought against states trying to water that particular article down. So I have a long history in education, also in this community.
Right.
I've been involved in so many things. And so I enjoy this. I enjoy good debate and good discussion. I try to be fair and balanced. I try not to be over the top, but I'm very clear about what I believe in, and clear when I share something. It's what I truly believe.
Right.
I'm not trying to give anybody a snow job, But I feel that if you tell the truth is what's most important, and tradition. And I always teach this at times. When people talk about oral tradition, people criticize Europeans, criticize us for not having a written language. And I object to that. I say that in oral tradition, lying is not tolerated. You cannot, because if people were allowed to lie, it would be the collapse of oral tradition. And that's why even the missionaries used to write about it, that how honest our people were. If two men were caught doing something wrong, they wouldn't lie about it. Yes, we did it, and it impressed the missionaries how honest we were, because we were raised to be honest, no matter what the consequences were. We were raised that way, and that's the strength of oral tradition, is the honesty. Non-native people who put things in writing can lie to you, because the only thing that's true is what's in writing, so they can lie, and because the treaty is the truth. The treaty is what counts, not what we say, or the Bible is what counts, not what we do. Mm-hmm. It's the difference between in oral tradition and European traditions of culture, how people live. So I always take an exception when people say that oral tradition is less than written. So those are the kind of debates I enjoy, because I like to defend our people, our culture, and that's how we should be living by.
And I think that's maybe where some of that could, those statements and that representation can sometimes be indicative of, the divisions in the community, where somebody was like, well, he's Longhouse and this is what he defends, and I don't agree with that, so therefore I don't agree with that philosophy. One of the things that I wanted to talk about was this whole other side, and I know we're trying to wrap up the show, so I'm going to be very brief, but the whole other parents, or the whole, there was always this things that didn't come out in the executive summary, maybe might be in the larger report, was the fact that in all of this there division amongst the parents also that is not reflective in here, and also the Fed Up with Education in Kahnawake page that was never referenced was a big. It's an ongoing investigation, but it was also something that I was surprised hasn't come out in here. Maybe it did in the larger report again, but that there was so much information that had come out on that page that was very confidential, and that was just, you had to wonder, where all of those documents came from, and it didn't come out here. And I think for some reason, or another, I do not believe that issue is fully put to rest.
No, it's not, and that really comes up under actually it's called under hiring qualified people, and
Yeah.
it talks about the ethics of, without using that word, when a teacher stands in public meeting, accuse administration of wrongdoing against him or her, and the public demands answers, is the only option to say is a human rights matter. But it goes also
Yeah.
into the internet and what's out there, and that there should be public education on how the internet should be used. But there's certainly been a breakdown in ethical behavior by some people. Why are confidential documents or information on the internet or other
That
places
may-
or
yes.
in brown
They
envelopes,
leaked their way out of
That's
somewhere
right.
onto the internet.
Yeah. So the report talks about public education and how people should be behaving, because although this is outside the scope of the mandate, but I guess it was such an impact in the whole situation that they had to comment on the abuse of the internet, and it's fun. And you look at how the MCK handled that case when there was a complaint by one of the school committee members against the band council about stuff on the internet. Their investigator proposed some sanctions, the MCK voted against sanctions against their own people. So the MCK hasn't been a good example of dealing with abuse of the internet. So so it continues in some ways, but that's self-discipline. I don't think there's much we can do about the internet. You only have to yourself understand the damage or how you want to what you want to put on the internet is a question of conscience.
The thing I just wanted to bring up, so you mentioned damage. At the end of the result, after 3 years, what kind of damage has resulted after this incident?
I think that the school committee has been unjustly targeted, and the Longhouse. But let's put the Longhouse aside. I've already dealt with that. But I think the school committee, by some of the school employees publicly attacking the school committee, I think is a bad precedent. I think that of course the suspension of the school committee by the Mohawk Council was a terribly damaging, and also because they never explained to the community why they suspended. They just said we got a bunch of complaints, and where those complaints
were
from
anonymous.
were anonymous complaints, and some of those complaints came from inside the education system. I think there's damage has been done inside that system, and I think there's that has yet to be resolved. And
Yeah.
It's created a lot of
Because
mistrust.
it's
maybe,
not
in
that
the-
those complaints weren't warranted. There's no
know.
evidence. We don't know. They were never presented. I mean, okay, to a certain degree, there has to be a respect for confidentiality. And some people felt that they weren't able to say how they truly felt because there was this fear out there in the community that, where people felt that they really, their only alternative was to go to the Mohawk Council of Kahnawake. So, I mean, on the flip side of that, there is this other side that exists in all of this.
That's right. Yeah, there was not just problems with the people from the Longhouse in here. There are many people in the community had problems who were not Longhouse, who had problems with whether one side or the other. Whether you supported the school committee or you supported Donald Lahesh or you supported the band council or you didn't support any of those things.
Yeah.
They crossed all kinds of lines. There was not a religious issue. It was not a political issue. It was political, but it was not. The dividing lines were not that clear. There were many people from different perspective, points of view and it came out. I think if there's any lessons learned is that it was the wrong way to handle it. And I think that the Donald Lahesh case, I think people have to really look back and say that how could we have prevented what happened? And everybody has to look back at that and see. And I think if anything from the summary will do is that it won't happen again.
Right.
I hope that people understand that'll never happen again the way it did.
Yeah. And hopefully, as a community, we can move forward and heal, and most importantly, learn from this. The executive summary can be found online at Kahnawake.com, www.kahnawake.com, which is Mohawk Council's website. It's available now to the public. Lance, any last thoughts before we wrap up the show?
Well, I think, first of all, thank you, Kenneth, for coming in. Appreciate that. I think as far as what I've been able to look into this, summary doesn't say enough. It says enough to be damaging, to create confusion, but nothing to where there's where something is absolute. Hopefully, within the larger the larger explanation, maybe there's going to be a little bit more. But as far as what I've seen, just in my own personal opinion, I've seen divisions being created again, and I'm hoping that there's going to be some sort of resolution to that. And last question from me, in a nutshell, Kenneth, what's your overall feeling about this?
About the summary? Yeah. But first of all, the summary is tantalizing in the sense that it only gives you a surface of what's in the full report, right. And so it's a little frustrating that way. I think there are some good recommendations on here. I think there are some bad recommendations. I think that there are. I think it's not well written. I think for $20,000, I think you could get a better written report. I mean, as an editor, I would find some things in here that should be better. Better said. But I hope that it starts a process where we can move on with finding solutions, and so that this whole issue does not happen again.
Don't forget, we do have a very important issue coming up here in Kahnawake and across Canada where, there's a big First Nations Education Act that we're going to need to be dealing with as a community. And how do we move forward into that type of legislation and dealing with things on a broader spectrum and all continue to work together to make sure that our education system stays intact and it is a reflection of Kahnawake and the parents and the history that is behind it. So with that, thank you both for coming on the program, and we hope you enjoyed this show. If you have any comments or questions, don't hesitate to give us a call at 632-9449 or hit us up by email at mohawktv@hotmail.com. Thanks for staying with us.
Kanya ke haga tadi adaraste kayerniga hiadu zewaderoru.
This program has been brought to you by Get and Go, a proud sponsor of Mohawk TV programming.